James, hi.
Hi, Dinara. Welcome back. So, today we're going to be looking at another academic reading for IELTS. And so this one is going to be on the serious search for an anti-aging pill. So, and with this one, you've got to fill in the blanks for the flow chart. So there's only 3. Once again, just like everything else, look at the words you need to fill in. So in this case, you're looking for the CR, the calorie restriction mimetic, less is processed. And then, you know, there's a missing word in each of the 2 theories.
Oh, this is complicated even this topic to read it in your native language. For example,
Yes.
If I read this in Russian, I'll be like...
Yeah, so as Winston Churchill once said, it's all Greek to me. So, and well, because it's a scientific text, I presume a lot of it will be Greek or Latin. So,
True.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so we're going to have a look at this. Well, we'll do our best anyway, and let's see. So, I'll read it out loud. No treatment on the market today has been proved to slow human aging. But one intervention, consumption of a low-calorie yet nutritionally balanced diet, works incredibly well in a broad range of animals, increasing longevity and prolonging good health. Those findings suggest that caloric restriction could delay aging and increase longevity in humans too. But what if someone could create a pill that mimicked the physiological effects of eating less without actually forcing people to eat less? A caloric restriction mimetic.
What does mimetic mean? So when you copy something?
I think it's related to mimic, which means copying something. Yeah.
Okay.
I would presume that. It's the first time I've ever come across that word. So, but that's what I would presume. Yeah, that makes sense from the context. The best studied candidate for a caloric restriction mimetic, 2-DG, 2-deoxy-D-glucose, works by interfering with the way cells process glucose. It has proved toxic at some doses in animals and so cannot be used in humans. But it has demonstrated that chemicals can replicate the effects of caloric restriction. The trick is finding the right one. Cells use the glucose from food to generate ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the molecule that powers many activities in the body. By limiting food intake, caloric restriction minimizes the amount of glucose entering cells and decreases ATP generation. When 2-DG is administered to animals that eat normally, glucose reaches cells in abundance, but the drug prevents most of it from being processed and thus reduces ATP synthesis. Researchers have proposed several explanations for why interruption of glucose processing and ATP production might retard aging. One possibility relates to the ATP making machinery's emission of free radicals, which are thought to contribute to aging and to such age-related diseases such as cancer by damaging cells. Reduced operation of the machinery should limit their production and thereby constrain the damage. Another hypothesis suggests that decreased processing of glucose could indicate to cells that food is scarce, even if it isn't, and induce them to shift into an anti-aging mode that emphasizes preservation of the organism over such luxuries as growth and reproduction.
Very interesting. Scarce, what does it mean?
Scarce? Scarce.
Scarce, right?
Scarce means not much available. So if food is scarce, then there's very little food available.
Guys, and glucose. Glucose occurs in corn, honey, fruits, fructose, fruit sugar.
It's basically sugar. So it's basically sugar.
So if you want to stop, slow down your aging, please have less glucose, less sugar. In my case, since I was a kid, for some reason, my parents, they didn't allow us to have lots of sugar, lots of sweets, and I don't eat.
Yeah, it is a good point, because the problem with sugar specifically is it leads to obesity in a more intense way than eating high fat, than having a high fat diet. So a high fat diet obviously comes with its own problems, notably cholesterol and all of and heart problems. But sugar is even worse, because it inhibits. You're more likely to get diabetes, and it inhibits the intake of insulin, I think, which is what brings down your blood sugar levels. So there was a big problem in the 1980s, specifically in the West, with companies recommended, with basically the cultural trend at the time was fat is bad. So they started going for all of these fat-free products, and to make sure, and obviously fat is a large part of the flavor of something. So, and if you don't have, and because they were trying to get fat-free products or very low in fat products, then they upped the amount of sugar, and that was really bad for people's health, and it's behind the obesity epidemic. It's because
in the US.
Yeah, well, and so the US most obviously, and but this is becoming more common in many other countries now. And it's because of the amount of sugar in the diet. So it's a big problem. Absolutely, the obesity epidemic.
Yeah, obviously they put it everywhere, including canned food. I watched a documentary how in Hawaii, because of this influence of American food, they started eating a lot of canned food. Also because it's cheaper, so their cancer number of people with cancer dramatically, not just grew, it jumped, and so skyrocketed, yes. And now they are returning to their old diet they had in the past before Americans came to Hawaii. Okay, guys, IELTS also, this, for example, article is interesting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that, as in, and specifically when you mention the Pacific Islands, so some of these places have the highest obesity rates on Earth. And a large part of that is canned food, and also specifically being given the fatty offcuts of meat that other people don't want. Like, so it is a real so it is a big problem. Yeah, this is but very interesting. Absolutely.
Guys, I recommend you to watch a documentary about prisoners in the US. Their diet is very simple, and they are massive. Like scientists, they studied their cases, how on this simple diet they get so healthy and like really massive, big.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also another big factor that hit the US specifically is that they encouraged farmers to grow too much food. And through growing too much food, it meant that the portion sizes increased, and suddenly you had huge amounts of corn. And so they started manufacturing massive amounts of corn syrup, and which also has a very high sugar content. So those are some other factors that went into this. But with prison specifically, I think one of the things is that, particularly with the growth of the private prison industry there, they started to, look to cut costs. And one area to cut costs is feeding prisoners, So and it's a very strange situation, but you do see that here to an extent as well, where frozen food is often much cheaper to buy than fresh food. It's quite strange when you think about it historically, because in the past, as in obesity or being overweight was a sign of wealth, whereas now it's the inverse. It's a sign of poverty, so a lot of the time.
Yeah. Also, by statistics nowadays, more people die from obesity than hunger. We all watch all these documentaries, people dying from hunger, blah, blah. But statistics say opposite. Obesity is a real problem.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And so, yes, exactly. And obviously, so, and I think one of the other problems is that they focus too much of it on exercise. And yeah, exercise, of course, it does something, so it's good to move around, as in doing 10,000 steps a day, it's very good for your health. But, as in if you've still got a very high sugar diet, it's not going to do that, so you are what you eat. You need to have a healthy diet. That's you can't train out of a bad diet. That's how it is.
I just remembered in the past I was dependent on cakes. I was lying to you about sugary things. So how I stopped, how is my addiction stopped? Through taking multivitamins in time.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Also, my trainer, he recommended me to eat after training protein bars.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Absolutely. It's a good idea. So let's have a look at the answers for this then. So the caloric restriction mimetic. So we need to find out what less of what is produced. The answer for this one is, and you can see it, I think it was even 1-for-1 was, with the way cells process glucose. So, so that's what it says. Calorie restriction minimizes the amount of glucose entering cells. So less, so I think it is less glucose is processed is the answer. Theory 1 is cells less damaged by disease because fewer are emitted. Cells less damaged by disease because fewer, let's have a look. One possibility relates to the ATP making machinery's emission of free radicals. So they've put one possibility, so that's one theory, is less damage by disease because fewer free radicals are emitted.
Emitted, what does it mean?
Given off or it's been put out. So then we've got the second theory, which is cells focus on because food is in short supply, and that comes back to the scarce. Another hypothesis, and this is why it's a good idea to know synonyms. Okay, so as in possibility, hypothesis, theory. Suggests that decreased processing of glucose could indicate to cells that food is scarce, induce them to shift into an anti-aging mode that emphasizes preservation of the organism over such luxuries as growth and reproduction. So cells focus on preservation because food is in short supply. And you can see another interesting point I just wanted to bring up is that the way that they're using theory on this page with the flowchart is a bit more in the way that we use it in common English, so as in, which is a sort of idea or a concept that you have in your head, a possibility, a hypothesis. Whereas in science, it's like an established law, so it's the highest sort of foundation that you have. That's why you often get people, the people who debate certain scientific factors like evolution, or for example, as in the Earth being round. So they say, oh, but it's just a theory. But the thing is that theory is actually, in a scientific setting, it's extremely high. So it's absolutely, so it's as good as it gets. It's much stronger than a hypothesis. But there, when they've put theory 1 and theory 2, it's a little bit more as we'd use it in common English, so an idea, a concept, a hypothesis. So it's interesting that you see the differences there between common English and scientific English.
Yes, I see your point, guys. IELTS reading is difficult.
Yes.
It is difficult, even for native speakers. For James, it's easier. First of all, James is super educated, intelligent, and he's an experienced teacher. Yeah. So me myself, I've been teaching English for a lot of years, but I was struggling.
Absolutely. It's tricky.
So to be able to understand those topics, like I can give you my advice. What I did, I watched a lot of documentaries, scientific documentaries. That's how I found out about David Attenborough and became his fan. Yeah, and find on YouTube a lot of scientific videos, documentaries, short ones you can start from. And if you need extra help, you can write us, and we will try to help you to prepare for IELTS and to pass it for, I think minimum you need 7 for studying in the UK and in the US.
Absolutely. Well done, Ara. Exactly. So always so that was it for this one, for this video for today. And so as always, it was a pleasure, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah. See you guys. Bye.